Walk into almost any room, and you'll notice something strange. There is always someone speaking the loudest, someone eager to prove they belong, someone determined to be noticed. Yet if you watch carefully, you'll notice another man. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't argue. He doesn't rush to fill every moment with words. He simply observes. And then, something remarkable happens. When he finally speaks, the entire room becomes quiet. Nobody tells them to listen. Nobody demands their attention. Yet everyone gives it willingly. Why? Because real authority has never depended on volume. Throughout history, the men who changed kingdoms, led armies, built civilizations, and shaped history rarely wasted words. They understood something that modern society has forgotten. Every unnecessary word costs you something. Every pointless explanation weakens your position. Every desperate attempt to be understood slowly gives away your power. Today, people believe influence comes from speaking more, posting more, explaining more, defending themselves more. Yet the Stoics taught the exact opposite. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history. Every day he was surrounded by politicians, generals, philosophers, flatterers, critics, and enemies. Imagine how many arguments he could have started. Imagine how many insults he could have answered. Imagine how many people expected explanations from him. Yet over time, Marcus discovered something that transformed the way he led. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every accusation deserves your response. And not every silence is weakness. Sometimes, silence is the highest form of confidence. Modern society has confused noise with strength, but strength has never needed permission. It has never begged for approval. It has never introduced itself loudly. It simply exists. The strongest mountain never announces itself. The deepest ocean never argues about its depth. The brightest star never competes with darkness. They simply are human beings. However, often do the opposite. We fear silence. We rush to fill every empty second. We explain ourselves before anyone even questions us. We defend decisions nobody challenged. We speak because we fear what silence might say about us. Yet that fear is exactly what steals our respect. By the end of this documentary, you will understand why the most respected man in the room almost always speaks the least. You will understand why silence has intimidated people for thousands of years. And most importantly, you will learn how to use silence, not to hide, but to become impossible to ignore. There is an invisible law that governs every human interaction. The person who appears least desperate usually possesses the greatest influence. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how people chase the approval of those who rarely seek anyone else's? Or how a single sentence from a quiet person often carries more weight than an hour-long speech from someone who talks constantly? This isn't an accident. It's psychology. Human beings naturally value what appears scarce. Gold is valuable because it is rare. Diamonds are admired because they are difficult to find. Even time becomes precious because none of us can create more of it. Words work the same way. When someone speaks endlessly, their words slowly lose value. But when someone chooses their moments carefully, every sentence feels important. Imagine two men. The first enters every conversation determined to prove how intelligent he is. He tells stories no one asked for. He explains every opinion. He interrupts. He fills every silence. At first, people listen, but eventually, they begin predicting everything he will say. His words become background noise. Now imagine another man. He listens more than he speaks. He observes before responding. When others argue, he remains calm. When emotions rise, his voice stays steady. Then, after everyone else has finished, he offers one thoughtful sentence. Suddenly, the room changes, not because he spoke louder, but because he spoke with intention. Silence creates anticipation, and anticipation creates attention. This is something modern society rarely teaches. Today, people measure influence by how often someone speaks. The Stoics measured influence differently. They believed wisdom wasn't found in the number of words spoken, but in the quality of the words that remained after unnecessary ones were removed. Seneca once warned that people often speak not because they have something valuable to say, but because they fear appearing insignificant. That fear still exists today. We talk because silence feels uncomfortable. We explain because misunderstanding frightens us. We defend ourselves because we crave acceptance. Yet every unnecessary explanation quietly tells the world, I need you to approve of me. Confidence never asks for permission. It doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. It understands something powerful. Not every battle deserves to be fought. Not every criticism deserves an answer. Sometimes, walking away speaks louder than winning an argument. Sometimes, remaining silent reveals more strength than delivering the perfect response. This is why truly respected people often appear mysterious. Not because they hide themselves, but because they never feel obligated to reveal everything. They understand that mystery invites curiosity, while constant explanation destroys it. Every sentence you choose not to say forces people to think. Every unnecessary sentence you remove makes the ones you keep infinitely more powerful. Silence is not empty. It is full of discipline. It is full of patience. It is full of confidence. And perhaps that is why it commands respect long before a single word is spoken. Every generation has its weakness. Some generations feared war. Others feared hunger. Ours fears silence. We wake up and immediately reach for our phones. Before our minds have even finished waking, we're already consuming someone else's words. Opinions, arguments, videos, messages, notifications, endless noise. The modern world rewards visibility. It teaches us that if people cannot see us, we don't matter. So we post everything. We explain everything. We react to everything. We defend our failures. We argue with strangers we'll never meet. Slowly, without realizing it, silence begins to feel uncomfortable. Yet the Stoics would have recognized this immediately. They understood that a restless tongue usually belongs to a restless mind. Think about the moments when people talk the most. During arguments, during insecurity, during fear, during moments when they desperately want to be understood. The louder the emotions, the louder the voice often becomes. But wisdom rarely arrives shouting. It arrives quietly. Imagine standing beside a calm lake. The surface is perfectly still. Because it is still, you can see your own reflection. Now imagine throwing stones into it every few seconds. Ripples. Distortion. Suddenly, the reflection disappears. The human mind works the same way. Every unnecessary conversation, every pointless argument, every impulse to explain yourself, is another stone thrown into your mind. Soon, you can no longer see yourself clearly. This is why so many people constantly seek validation. They have become so accustomed to outside voices that they can no longer hear their own. Marcus Aurelius spent countless hours in silence, not because he disliked people, but because he understood something few leaders ever learn. A man who cannot sit quietly with his own thoughts will eventually become a prisoner of everyone else's opinions. Let that sink in. The person who constantly needs to explain usually isn't trying to convince others. They're trying to convince themselves. The person who constantly argues usually isn't defending the truth. They're defending their ego, and the person who cannot tolerate silence often fears what silence might reveal. Modern society has convinced us that every opinion deserves to be shared. It doesn't. Every emotion deserves to be expressed. It doesn't. Every criticism deserves a response. It doesn't. Sometimes, the most intelligent thing you can do is allow a conversation to end. Not because you lost, but because your peace is worth more than proving a point. Imagine how much energy people waste trying to win arguments they'll forget next week. Imagine how much confidence disappears trying to make everyone understand. Now imagine using that same energy to build yourself instead, to improve, to learn, to become stronger. Suddenly, silence no longer feels empty. It becomes productive. It becomes a place where discipline grows. And perhaps that is why truly powerful people are comfortable alone. Because they discovered something the noisy world never teaches. Solitude is not loneliness. It is where strength quietly begins. Imagine carrying the weight of an entire empire, knowing that every decision you make could save thousands or destroy thousands. Imagine waking each morning, knowing that generals waited for your command. Politicians wanted your approval. Citizens demanded your attention. Enemies hoped for your mistakes. This wasn't imagination. This was Marcus Aurelius. Every day, he was surrounded by noise, voices competing for influence, advisors insisting they knew best, critics waiting for him to fail. Yet history remembers him, not because he shouted louder than anyone else, but because he remained calm while everyone else lost control. That calmness wasn't natural. It was trained. Marcus understood something that every great leader eventually learns. Emotion demands an immediate response. Wisdom waits. Think about that. Every insult asks you to react. Every accusation asks you to defend yourself. Every disagreement tempts you to prove you're right. But Marcus refused to become a prisoner of impulse. He knew something most people never discover. Your first reaction is rarely your wisest one. There is incredible power in the pause, that brief moment between what happens and how you respond. Most people never experience it. Something happens, and they immediately speak. They interrupt. They defend. They justify. They attack. They regret it later. Marcus chose differently. He paused, and in that pause, he found freedom. Freedom from anger. Freedom from pride. Freedom from needing to win every conversation. Imagine two kings. One spends every day reminding people that he is powerful. The other never mentions it. Which one truly believes in his own authority? Real power never needs constant advertisement. The lion never tells the forest that he is a lion. His presence is enough. Marcus carried himself the same way. He didn't need endless speeches. He didn't need to silence every critic. He understood something timeless. Every argument you refuse to enter protects your peace. Every unnecessary explanation you never give protects your dignity. Every emotional reaction you control strengthens your character. That's why the strongest men often appear quiet. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they know the cost of speaking carelessly. Words can solve problems, but they can also create them. Marcus never feared silence. He feared speaking without purpose. And perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons his life leaves behind. Before you speak, ask yourself, will these words improve the situation or simply satisfy my ego? Because once words leave your mouth, they no longer belong to you. But silence always remains under your control. Every truly respected man shares one habit. It isn't wealth. It isn't intelligence. It isn't physical strength. It is restraint, the ability to do something, yet choosing not to. Think about that for a moment. Anyone can shout. Anyone can interrupt. Anyone can become angry. Anyone can try to win an argument. Very few people can remain completely in control of themselves. And that is what separates influence from insecurity. Watch the people who naturally command respect. They rarely rush. They don't answer every criticism. They don't laugh the loudest. They don't speak the most. They don't feel the need to prove they belong. They already know who they are. That certainty changes everything. Imagine entering a meeting. 10 people are speaking over one another. Everyone wants their opinion heard. Everyone wants recognition. Then one person quietly listens. He studies the room. He notices what others miss. He waits. Minutes pass. Finally, he speaks. Not because he wanted attention, but because he had something worth saying. Suddenly, everyone listens. Why? Because silence created authority long before his words did. Powerful men understand that attention is earned, not demanded. This is why they rarely explain themselves. They understand something most people never learn. The more you chase respect, the faster it runs away. Respect behaves like a shadow. Chase it, and it keeps moving. Walk your own path, and it quietly follows. There is another habit. Almost nobody notices. Powerful men are comfortable allowing others to underestimate them. Most people panic when they aren't recognized. They immediately try to prove themselves. They mention their achievements. They tell stories about their success. They subtly compete. The strongest man in the room often does none of that. He doesn't need strangers to confirm his value. His confidence was built long before he entered the room. And because of that, he is impossible to manipulate. Praise doesn't control him. Criticism doesn't control him. Approval doesn't control him. Rejection doesn't control him. Why? Because his identity no longer belongs to other people. Imagine the freedom that creates. Imagine walking into every conversation without feeling the need to impress anyone. Imagine making decisions without worrying who agrees. Imagine saying only what needs to be said and leaving the rest in silence. That isn't arrogance. It is self-possession. The Stoics believed the highest form of power wasn't controlling other people. It was controlling yourself. And perhaps that is why history remembers quiet leaders long after loud men have been forgotten. The loud man may dominate today's conversation, but the disciplined man shapes tomorrow's history. Respect is rarely destroyed in a single moment. It disappears quietly, one unnecessary sentence at a time. Most people never notice it happening. They simply wake up one day, wondering why others no longer take them seriously. The tragedy is that they usually caused it themselves, not through failure, but through unnecessary words. Imagine carrying a priceless glass vase. Every careless movement creates another crack. The vase doesn't shatter immediately. It weakens, little by little. Respect works the same way. Every time you overshare, another crack appears. Every time you desperately explain yourself, another crack appears. Every time you seek validation, another crack appears. Until eventually, people stop seeing confidence. They begin seeing uncertainty. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing honesty means revealing everything. It doesn't. Wisdom knows the difference between honesty and unnecessary exposure. Not every thought belongs in a conversation. Not every plan belongs on social media. Not every victory needs an announcement. Powerful people understand something most never learn. Privacy protects power. Think about a seed. Before it becomes a tree, it spends months hidden beneath the soil. Imagine digging it up every day, just to prove it exists. It would never grow. Yet that's exactly what many people do with their dreams. They announce every goal, every business idea, every opportunity, every plan, before it has the chance to become reality. Then they wonder why their confidence disappears. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is work quietly. Let results introduce you. There is another habit that quietly destroys respect. Talking when emotions are in control. Anger speaks quickly. Pride speaks loudly. Fear speaks constantly. Wisdom waits. Think back to the biggest arguments you've ever had. How many words do you wish you could take back? Most of them were spoken in moments when emotion was driving the conversation. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that another person's behavior belongs to them, but your response always belongs to you. That single idea changes everything. Suddenly, you no longer feel responsible for proving yourself. You no longer feel responsible for winning every disagreement. You no longer feel responsible for correcting every misunderstanding. Peace becomes more valuable than being right. And here's the strange part. The less you fight to earn respect, the more naturally it begins to appear. Because people trust those who trust themselves. They follow those who don't constantly seek followers. They admire those who remain calm while everyone else is desperate to be heard. Respect doesn't disappear because you speak. It disappears when your words begin revealing insecurity instead of conviction. Silence cannot hide weakness forever, but it can prevent unnecessary weakness from being displayed. Choose your words carefully, because every sentence is teaching people how they should see you. Silence is not something you are born with. It is something you train. Every day, every conversation, every difficult moment gives you another opportunity to practice it. Most people believe self-control begins with discipline. The Stoics believed it begins with awareness, because you cannot control what you never notice. So begin by observing yourself. Notice how quickly you feel the need to respond. Notice how uncomfortable silence sometimes makes you. Notice how often you explain things that nobody even questioned. Do not judge yourself. Simply observe. Every great change begins with seeing clearly. Then, practice the pause before answering. Breathe before defending yourself. Wait before sending that message. Read it one more time. Ask yourself, does this need to be said? Or do I simply need to feel understood? That single question has prevented countless unnecessary battles. There is another practice that may feel uncomfortable at first. Let people misunderstand you. Yes, you heard that correctly. Not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Some people have already decided who they believe you are. No explanation, no matter how perfect, will change their mind. Your energy is too valuable to spend chasing acceptance from people committed to misunderstanding you. Let your character speak over time. Truth has a strange habit. It survives, even when nobody rushes to defend it. Another habit worth building is learning to become comfortable with empty space. In conversations, don't fear a few seconds of silence. Let the other person think. Let your own thoughts settle. Silence is not awkward. We have simply forgotten how to experience it. The strongest negotiators understand this. They know that after making an important statement, silence becomes their greatest ally. Most people rush to fill it. They weaken their own position, simply because they become uncomfortable. Learn to remain still. There is also wisdom in protecting your future. Stop announcing every plan. Stop revealing every ambition. Stop seeking applause before the work is complete. Build quietly, improve quietly, win quietly. Then, let your results speak with a voice no words could ever match. Finally, remember this. Silence is not about becoming distant. It is not about becoming cold. It is not about refusing to communicate. It is about choosing words. Instead of wasting them, speak with kindness. Speak with purpose. Speak with clarity, but never speak, simply because the world has become uncomfortable with silence. Because one day, you will discover something extraordinary. The fewer words you use to prove your worth, the more obvious your worth becomes. And that is the quiet strength the Stoics spent their lives trying to master. Imagine yourself 1 year from today. You walk into a room. Nothing about you demands attention. You don't enter loudly. You don't try to impress anyone. You don't tell people who you are. Yet somehow, they notice you. Why? Because something inside you has changed. You no longer carry the desperate need to be understood. You no longer chase approval. You no longer waste energy trying to convince people of your value. You simply live it. Most people spend their lives trying to control how others see them. The Stoics chose something much greater. They controlled themselves. They understood a truth that still challenges us today. You cannot control another person's opinion. You cannot control their jealousy, their criticism, their misunderstanding, their expectations. But you can control your response, and that changes everything. Because the moment your peace no longer depends on someone else's approval, you become free. Real freedom isn't having everyone agree with you. It is remaining at peace, even when they don't. Think about how much of your life has been spent explaining yourself, trying to prove you meant well, trying to convince people you were right, trying to correct every misunderstanding. Imagine taking all of that energy and investing it somewhere else, into your discipline, your health, your family, your purpose, your character. Suddenly, your life begins moving forward, instead of moving in circles. The greatest lesson silence teaches is not how to speak less. It teaches you how to think more. It forces you to slow down, to observe, to understand, to respond, instead of react. That is where wisdom begins. Long after this video ends, people will continue speaking. Social media will continue shouting. Arguments will continue. Opinions will continue. The world will continue rewarding noise. But remember this: mountains never compete with the wind. Oceans never argue with the rain. The sun never asks the sky for permission to rise. They simply fulfill their purpose. Quietly, consistently, unshaken. Become like that. Let your work speak louder than your promises. Let your discipline speak louder than your excuses. Let your character speak louder than your reputation. And let your silence remind the world that true strength has never needed an audience. One day, people will wonder what changed about you. They will notice your calm, your confidence, your presence. They may ask for your secret. Smile. You won't need to explain. Because by then, your life will already have said everything that needed to be said. The strongest voice is the one that doesn't need to shout.